Al, it's time to determine the best of the best.
Dun.
It's time for a little competition.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
A little bit.
Little bit.
Competition.
Little competition here. Hello, welcome to this week's episode of the Seasonal Anime Checkup, OVA. It's a podcast where we have conversations about video games, anime, and manga. Hello, I'm Jared, joined as always by Doc, Al, and Ladium.
Hello.
This is episode number 241. We're going to have a little competition today.
Yep.
This is essentially a preview of a feature coming soon to the Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to give it to you for free here first. And maybe you'll be like, oh, man, I like this concept. I want to go listen to more of these when we decide to eventually do more of these.
Yeah.
So, essentially, we are doing a draft where we are going to take video game consoles and pick and choose them. Mm-hmm. Caveat being, once one console is picked, the other person can't pick it.
Mm-hmm.
Once we have finished up and we have drafted everything, we're going to compare our list together and determine who we think has the better lineup of consoles drafted. Now, the Patreon feature is going to be a little bit more hyper-specific because we were going to hone in on console specifically and be like, what's the best games from that console, essentially. Mm-hmm. But this is a little bit more broad and, just a little bit more easier for us to do and just, give you a better idea of what the concept is.
Mm-hmm.
So with that all being said, we need to determine who gets the draft first.
And we're going to do 4 home and 2 handheld each.
Yes. So you have to pick 4 home consoles, 2 handheld consoles. So we're going to have 6 total at the end of this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way it is.
It's just the way it is.
I'm going to do a random number generator, 1 to 2.
Wow.
I will be number 1.
Okay.
Al will be number... Actually, we'll go off of the list that we have on Google. Al will be number 1. I will be number 2. So when I rig this and I get 2, we'll know that I'm just, that good. All right, I'm clicking the button.
Click it.
It didn't change, so it's 2. So I've rigged it so I am the number 1 draft pick.
Dang.
Yes. Big success for your old pal, Jared. All right. So we're just going to dive right into this. I don't know how long this is going to take. It might be a very short episode or it might be a longer episode. Who knows?
I don't know, but I'm not feeling well, so if it is short, then it's fine.
Exactly. So we're not going to do snake style. We'll just go back and forth.
What is snake style?
So basically it would be I would pick first, you pick the next 2, and then I pick the next 2, and then you pick the next 2 until finally you, at the end, pick the last one.
Yeah, that's weird. We're not doing that.
That doesn't really work with only 2 people.
No, I don't like that. Who's your champion?
That's a good question. So we have not done really much prep work for this. I think the ones we're going to do on Patreon, we're going to do prep work for and have actual lists of stuff going into it. There's 2 consoles in mind I have, which shouldn't be that much of a surprise knowing me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the idea of what do I want?
Yeah, I've got a few in mind.
I think I can get one next round. So I think I have to go with this one as the number 1 pick.
Okay.
And it's not going to be a surprise, but I'm picking the Super Nintendo as the number 1 draft pick.
All right, that was the one I would have picked, so nailed it.
Al, what are you going to go with?
I am going to go with... What am I going to go with? What am I going to go with? What am I going to go with? This is hard.
It is.
Because I got to figure out, what are you going to pick?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. This one might be a little surprising for you. Maybe that I would pick this, but... PlayStation 1.
Ooh. Solid choice.
I thought so.
So that was in the ballpark of where my other first round pick would have gone.
Uh-huh.
But I'm going to go with my second pick and choose the PlayStation 2.
That was my next pick. Okay, so I guess I'm next, huh?
Yes.
I'm going to go with the Nintendo DS.
Ooh, solid choice. Solid choice. Gotta applaud that one.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah, that was definitely high on my handheld
Mm-hmm.
ladder, so it's a good choice. Good choice. Um, hmm. Where do I want to go from here?
See, it's hard, right?
It is. With my third pick, I'm going to go with the Game Boy.
All right. All right. Solid choice. My third pick is actually going to be another Nintendo one,
Okay.
the Nintendo Switch.
Ooh, interesting. I wasn't sure if we would get any modern consoles in this or not.
The Switch has had a really good catalog so
It's
far.
true. It's very true.
And like one of our favorite Zelda games is on there, so it's hard to ignore.
You're right. You're right.
But I wouldn't put anything else modern on there.
Yeah. Hmm.
It just felt right.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. I feel
Hmm.
like the home console one's going to be the hardest part because like there's definitely an upper echelon
Yep.
that I feel like we have very much kind of picked and pulled from already.
Yep.
There's a few things still up there that I think are very solid choices, but once you get past that, it's a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more in the weeds, and you're just like,
Yep. Yep.
hmm. So I'm trying to decide if I go and get one of those now, or do I get my second handheld choice before you?
I don't know.
Also, I guess we're not. We will make a clarification here,
Okay.
but I'm assuming we're going to count the Switch as a home console, not a handheld.
Yeah, we're counting
Okay,
it at home.
just in case anyone would ask about that.
Yeah, that's actually a solid question, but I would consider that home because that's its primary focus as a home console.
Right.
If I had done like the whatever the light one, like that one might have been considered a handheld,
Hmm.
but we're going OG Switch here. What are you going
Hmm.
with? What are you going with?
What am I going with?
What are you going with?
What am I going with?
I like that we had to split our friends, the PlayStation 1 and the PlayStation
We
2.
did.
Poor guys.
PlayStation 1's a solid choice.
I I thought it was a solid choice and I was worried that you were gonna go for that one pretty early.
Like if that
I
was
mean like
available right now, I would just be like, whoop.
yep, yep. I mean, like there's so many good
That would
games
be a
on the
no-brainer.
PlayStation.
Hmm.
And I mean like your first two are ones I definitely would have picked. 100%. But that's why we can't do it as drafting.
Okay, so I'm gonna make this pick. There's definitely
Okay.
another handheld console I should pick here
Okay.
that I believe is the better choice. However,
However,
it is me,
yeah.
and I have to do this for the brand.
Yep.
The fourth pick, I'm picking the PlayStation Vita.
That was what I was gonna pick. So you took it from me. Um You stole it.
It's true. I will say,
Mm-hmm.
although I do have the Game Boy,
Mm-hmm.
I think Game Boy Advance would be eligible here because that's not a Game Boy.
Oh, would it?
I think I see those as different consoles, in my opinion.
I mean, that does make
Because
sense.
I would
They
put
did
Game Boy
use
and Game Boy
different types
Color
of
together, but Game Boy
cartridges.
Advance would be something different.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that throws a wrench into my handheld plans.
I mean, look, if you were me, if I was you right now, there is one
Mhm.
option in handheld that you can literally wait till the very end because I've picked my 2 already. So, and I would just use that as my 6th pick.
Yeah,
So you have the benefit of now just being like, I can hold off on picking a handheld because I've already picked all mine. So there's no gonna be no more countering.
you're
So you
right.
can just go all in on home consoles.
All right. Well, with that being said, man, mine's gonna lean heavily on this one company, Nintendo Entertainment System,
The
and
NES.
the NES. I mean, I'm not surprised that mine leans heavily Nintendo, but
No, it makes a whole lot of sense. Um, so I only have home consoles left.
hmm
Hmm.
hmm.
That's a good pick, last pick, because I was eyeing the disc system, but I would put that all together as with the NES, so that's off the table.
hmm.
I'm gonna go with a weird strategy.
Okay.
I'm gonna pick something here that I don't know if you would pick, and I'm
hmm.
also gonna hope that you don't pick my next pick afterwards. So
Okay.
my 5th pick, I'm going with the Sega Dreamcast.
All right. Interesting. Um, I probably I don't think that I'm gonna pick what you would pick.
I mean, what do you
I
think
don't.
I would pick here as my last home console?
That's a good question.
I'm gonna get in your head. Mind games here.
Um, I mean, are we including like wild ones and Japanese only and stuff like that too?
Potentially, I would say, yeah.
Interesting.
That's not where I was going, but
No, I was just curious.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what you would pick, but I don't think that what I'm gonna pick would be something you would pick. I really don't.
Interesting.
And I promise it's not the 64.
Let's keep that Nintendo train rolling.
well, maybe, but I mean the 64 would be something that I think you would think I would pick.
Yeah, yes.
Because I'm a big fan of the 64 and there's some really good games on the 64.
However, I think as well, I think there's other stuff above the 64 that you would pick before that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What do I want to pick? What do I want to pick? I'm also bouncing between two on
handheld.
handheld.
Mm-hmm.
Oofa doofa, this is hard. It is very hard. Hmm.
Look, if you don't pick the N gauge with your last pick, I'm going to think very low of you.
I'm not.
Wow,
All right.
how dare you?
All right. You ready for my next one?
Yes. Al's 5th pick, the Nintendo or the Nintendo.
GameCube.
Okay. Not a surprise.
Did you expect that?
Kind of.
Which one did you think I was gonna pick? GameCube or 64? Like when you went into this.
I would have figured GameCube over 64.
Mm.
Very Nintendo heavy.
It's very Nintendo.
Also, your
heavy.
last pick's probably going to be Nintendo heavy as well. So,
Yep, it is.
so yes, I took a gamble on this last pick in case you might have picked it. I didn't know, but you went very Nintendo heavy, so I lucked out here. My 6th and final pick, the Xbox 360.
Oh wow, that is not what I would have expected.
What were you expecting? Something just weird?
No, I thought you were probably gonna go with like the Genesis or something.
I'm not a Sega person, really. I didn't have a Genesis growing up. I haven't really played a lot of Genesis games.
You say as you have Dreamcast on your list.
I have a Dreamcast. I'm looking at it right now.
Genesis was a good system. It was a really good system.
I might have gone Sega CD, if anything.
Oh man, Sega CD. We had one of those. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yes, I did. Al's sixth and final pick is a handheld.
It is a handheld. Which one am I going with?
To me, there's one answer here.
Really?
Yes. I understand that you're probably wavering between two, but to me, there is one answer. It's the one I should have picked, but I went with the Vita instead.
Well, if I pick the opposite one, then I'm gonna feel dumb. You know? Ugh.
You had this all. We planned this out, so you'd have to pick this last, and now you're just like, oh god, this is harder than I was thinking.
I've been struggling, man. I've been trying to figure it out, and I just I kept putting it off because I couldn't figure out which one I was gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna bite this bullet. Don't make that sound. Don't make that sound. Don't make me feel dumb. Game Boy Advance. You would have gone 3DS?
I would have gone 3DS.
I think there's better games on the Game Boy Advance.
Ooh. I think that's a hard disagree for me, but also I didn't have a GBA growing up, so that's definitely clouding my judgment there. But the 3DS is real good.
It is. It is. I agree with you.
And the fact that it's not on either of our lists is shocking to me.
Yeah. I mean, it probably would have been on my list, but I was thinking more of there are a lot of games on the Game Boy Advance that I really, really enjoyed playing.
That's fair.
And I mean, same with the 3DS, but when I was thinking of what are some games that come to mind on these handhelds immediately, and Game Boy Advance had more that I could think of that I was like, yeah, I would play this right now if I wanted to. So yeah, it might have been a weird choice for you, but I think it makes sense for me.
I totally think it makes sense for you. So I'm not surprised or anything. It's just that that's a hard choice.
It is a hard choice. I told you I've been struggling with it this whole time because I was bouncing between two of them and I didn't know which one to pick, and I am sweating.
It's the stress of having to pick.
That or my body's just failing me.
All right, let's go over our draft picks here to catch everyone up. With my first pick, I picked the Super Nintendo, which I was wavering. I was wavering between that and the PS2, but I was like, if I pick PS2, she's going to snap up the Super Nintendo immediately. So I had to counter that.
You are correct. That is exactly what I would have done if you had put PS2. I would have immediately put SNES because I honestly would consider that the top tier of these.
Yeah, it is it's a very strong number one.
Yeah.
Al's number one, the PlayStation 1, which I was surprised by.
What did you expect?
A Nintendo console.
That makes sense.
So when you started trying PlayStation, I was like, oh, she's gonna pick PS2, and I'm boned. But you went PS1, and I was like, oh, thank goodness.
I mean, honestly, bro, what system has Final Fantasy VIII?
I mean, a lot of systems now.
Fair. Which one did it originally come out for?
The PlayStation 1. But you could play it on PS2.
You could, and I did.
There's a game called Final Fantasy X-2 on the PS2.
There is a game called Final Fantasy X-2
Shadow
on
Hearts.
PS2.
The Bouncer.
Also, Shadow Hearts 1 and 2, also very good. I would have picked the PS2 if you had not picked the PS2, but I went with the PS1 mainly because, like I said, Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9 are all there, and those are all really good games. 8 and 9 are better, though, just saying.
Was there anything you were considering outside of the PS1 for number one, or outside of Super Nintendo and PS1?
No, I would have picked Super Nintendo if I had not done PlayStation 1. Yeah.
It's a solid pick. The PS1 is very good.
And my next pick would have been the PlayStation 2. But obviously that did not happen.
Yeah, so my second pick was the PS2. The Super Nintendo and PS2 were my 1 and 2. They would have been 1 and 2 on my board, so
they were my 1 and 3.
So I'm happy that I got both of those. And like I said earlier, I was definitely debating taking PS2 number one, but I knew if I did, you would take Super Nintendo, and that would just screw up everything that I had planned. So knew I had to take it immediately. So
Yeah, I mean, you got the benefit of going first, so
Mhm.
you were able to get like all of my top picks except for PS1.
Al's number two pick, the Nintendo DS, a very solid pick. I was definitely considering that as well.
Yeah, I mean the DS is a good
Mhm.
system. You know, it hardware wise it's a little clunky and they were able to do some revisions that made it better, but like the game catalog on that is insane.
Mhm.
It's insane how many good games are on the DS.
It's very true. My third pick, I went with the Game Boy, which is just Game Boy is a classic console.
Yep.
The library, if you like to me, I conclude the color as well, just because it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Very just huge library and varied library. Like some of the games aren't great though, like they have not aged well, but like in terms of just like nostalgia and just like remembering my childhood, like a lot of that comes with the Game Boy. So Game Boy holds a very special place in my heart. Although I probably could have waited on picking the Game Boy because I don't know if you would have picked OG Game Boy.
I would have if you had not.
Oh, okay. So I guess that was a good choice then. Because I was kind of like, I definitely DS would have been up there for me if it was available, but it wasn't. So I went with Game Boy to go with my number one handheld pick. Al's number three, the Nintendo Switch. Honestly, was not even considering the Switch.
I'm surprised because I mean it has had a very, very solid catalog. And I know that people like to give it sometimes, but like there have been a ton of really good games.
No,
on the
you are
Switch.
100% right. So like it is a very good catalog, and which is still growing and ongoing and everything. For some reason, I was just like, I wasn't thinking like modern consoles when I was like thinking of this. So it was just like when you put Switch down as three, I was like, oh, that's a good one that I wasn't considering, but that's really good.
I mean, it's just got so many incredible games. And honestly, it's my most played out of the ones that I've got. So
Yeah.
I felt like it was a natural fit.
Yeah. My number four, the PlayStation Vita.
I was also going to pick that.
I knew one of us was going to put it on there. So I figured like that would be a fun one to have, but
to deny me the Atome.
yeah, honestly, the 3DS is a better console. However, the Vita is just more fun.
It is, and the Vita was really experimental, so that was cool. And it's got a lot of fantastic games on it.
It's
and
true.
as I mentioned, like it was my Atome machine for a while. So you can't really go wrong with that.
No. Hashtag Vita never die.
Vita never die.
Al's number four pick, the Nintendo Entertainment System.
Some good video games on that.
It's true. Very classic pick.
There's also some really terrible video games.
That's
on
also
that
true.
But I mean, yeah, there's still games on here that are super fun to play. And obviously in terms of like historicizing these systems, like you can't understate how important that system is.
Yeah.
Were you ever gonna pick that one? Was that even on your radar of something you would have picked?
Yes, but I figured you would probably pick it at some point, so I just kind of like pushed it down my list. Because there was other stuff I wanted that I wasn't sure if you would go for. So I kind of prioritized that over getting the NES. But the NES is, again, like you said, is a very solid pick, very historical pick, and a lot of good games on there, a lot of bad games on there, but you can't go wrong with the NES. My number five pick, the Sega Dreamcast.
I was surprised by this one, honestly.
Dreamcast is fun. Like you said with what were we saying? The Vita, an experimental console.
Yes, it was.
Just there's a lot of weird stuff on that console. A lot of it is kind of janky. A lot of it's just some arcade ports here and there, but it's also just fun. Like when I think of playing Dreamcast games, I just think of like just having a good time and just enjoying myself. And like it's just a nice little console to have on your shelf as well because it's very small and compact. And it's like, look at that. Look at it next to the PS2 and the PS3, them big bulking systems. And it's like, hello, I'm the Dreamcast. Also, VMU. VMU's cool. A little screen on your controller. That's awesome.
I never had a Dreamcast like when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
So like I missed that entire.
I didn't either. I didn't buy one until I was like 22. Also, you could just pirate all the games on there, so.
Yeah. We were just talking about that.
I definitely do not have a bunch of burned CDRs of Japanese games or anything.
No.
Definitely don't.
Why would you have? Literally, we were just talking about that at that librarian thing the other day.
Amazing.
I'm not even kidding you. Not you specifically not having those, but how it was totally a thing that you're not supposed to do. And wow, it's a bad thing, guys.
Very bad.
Very bad.
So Al's number 5 pick, the Nintendo GameCube. It's got a handle.
It does have a handle.
Here's a fun story. When I was thinking of buying a Dreamcast, I was also contemplating buying a GameCube. So it was the Dreamcast or the GameCube.
Oh.
But I went with the Dreamcast overall.
So wild that was the 5 pick was the 2 and I went with a GameCube when I was younger. So like I had a GameCube at launch.
I've never owned a GameCube. I've really barely ever played them. Like I've knew people who had GameCubes and everything, but like it's just one of those consoles I like just haven't really had a lot of experience with, so really wasn't one that was on my radar, which shouldn't be too surprising, but I wouldn't say it's a bad pick or anything. Like it's a very solid pick. That is a very solid catalog, even though it's a very weird time for Nintendo.
It was a weird time for Nintendo, but a lot of really good stuff came out on that console that I think that it kind of gets overlooked, especially like the only thing that people really talk about still is Melee for some reason.
Yeah.
But I mean, you had Wind Waker on there. Amazing. That was the first system that you had Resident Evil 4 on. And then you had the Resident Evil remake, and then you had 0 on there. You had Eternal Darkness, which was a fantastic game that like really, really messed with what you had with the system. Very, very clever. You had Luigi's Mansion. That game ruled. Super Mario Sunshine sucked, so we're not going to talk about that one. But like you had a lot of
Twilight
really,
Princess.
Really good well, that came out on the Wii,
but it also came out on the GameCube.
It did. But I played
it counts.
It on the Wii. It totally does. You also had some really cool like Zelda releases of like the older Zelda games, and this is the first time that we got the like Master Quest version of Ocarina, which was interesting.
Yeah. The wrestling games on GameCube are supposedly also very good. I know that's not in your wheelhouse or anything, but the wrestling games on GameCube are definitely talked about as like upper echelon wrestling games. So the GameCube does have that going forward as well.
You know what else the game?
What else does the GameCube have?
It had the Sonic game that gave us City Escape.
Oh, is that really something you really want to say as a positive?
Roll it around at the speed of sound. Why not?
Was that also on the Dreamcast?
I don't know. I played it on the GameCube, man.
What kind of Sonic fan are you?
Not honestly, one. a casual one. Like I played Sonic 2 a lot, and I played the original Sonic, and then I played that a bit, and yeah, that's about it.
There you go.
Anyway, the GameCube was a good system.
It's got a handle.
And it had a little attachment you could put on it that made the Game Boy Advance games play on it, which is pretty cool. I enjoyed doing that a lot. Anyway, the GameCube was a good system.
GameCube.
GameCube.
So yeah.
Had the little up thing on the GameCube.
That was your penultimate pick.
Yep.
My final pick, the Xbox 360.
Interesting choice. I would not have expected that.
360 is really good.
I mean, when I think 360, the only one that I'm like, man, that's a video game that like comes to mind immediately is Lost Odyssey.
Oh, of course.
To the surprise of no one. Like Lost Odyssey is a good video game, but most of the other games that I played, like I played on PlayStation, except for like Eternal Sonata was on 360, but I eventually got on PS3 too.
Yeah, like I had a 360 before I had a PS3, like well before I had a PS3, so
Same.
it was my go-to console for a long time, and it's like that's where a lot of my friends played and everything. So I have a lot of like multiplayer memories with the 360, and just like honestly, I remember the first time I was around someone who had a 360. I picked up the 360 controller and I was like, this might be the best controller I've ever felt in my hands.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing because I've never liked the Xbox controllers. You know that.
Mhm.
Like since the original Xbox, I've never ever liked a single Xbox controller. They're all too big for my
Well, it's because
hands.
you got tiny hands.
I have tiny
Small,
baby
small
hands.
owl.
Small, small owl. But it makes it really hard for me to enjoy playing the games when the controllers like are too
I
big
mean, that's
and
fair. That's fair.
that like they hurt to
I
hold.
got big hands, so I was like, oh man, this controller feels very good.
uh like even with the Series X controller, like I switched it out for the Xbox One controller partially because that's the most tolerable Xbox controller I've ever used.
Mhm.
Um but I still don't like it. Like the one of my favorite controllers in my entertainment system at this moment is when you put the Joy Cons in the thingy and play it like that.
I don't like that.
Oh, I love it. It's perfect
It's
for my
so
hands.
small.
It's perfect for my hands. It's legit my favorite controlling system. Like,
See, there's our
oh my God.
difference. I'm like,
It's
oh, this is tiny,
beautiful.
and you're like, oh yes, finally.
Finally, a controller for my
Look, I was
hands.
the weirdo who was like, man, I can't believe Sony went back on the boomerang controller because I thought that would be a nice controller for my hands.
The boomerang. Oh my God.
I was disappointed when they reneged that. But yes, the
Rip.
Xbox 360, that was my final pick. Like I said, there's a lot of good games on the 360. It's a huge catalog because there's just so much like crossover stuff as well, like cross-platform games as well. But like
Mhm.
it was, the console of that generation. It was
Mhm.
the one that put Microsoft really on the mat and just
Yep.
like made them more of a force, which kind of led to their downfall in the next generation and then brought them back this generation. You know,
Yeah.
the push and pull between Microsoft and Sony. But yeah, I have a lot of good memories with the 360, so I'm very happy with that pick.
Good.
And then finally, your final pick, the Game Boy Advance,
Yeah.
the GBA.
The GBA. GBA had a lot of good games on it.
Mhm.
Also was a very nice handheld console in terms of like size, weight, all that. It felt really nice to hold. Um, my brother gifted me a Game Boy Advance with Golden Sun,
Mhm.
and I was like, wow, my brother really loves me. Because those games are just fantastic. Like I had to get the second one when that came out. It was beautiful. Minish Cap is like one of the best games that's in the Zelda series. Um, love Minish Cap. Like Game Boy Advance had so many good games, and they were actually able to do some pretty interesting things. Like they put some like DKC games on there. They weren't like beautiful or anything, but they tried. So you had some nice experimentation that was happening with the GBA that I liked. Um, but I just think that had such a solid catalog of games.
Yeah,
They were very, very fun.
I think that's a solid choice.
Except for you think that I should have picked the DS. I mean the 3DS.
Yeah.
What games would you say the 3DS would? I mean, there's a lot because I have a
There's a
lot of
lot.
3DS games. I have a lot of 3DS games over there for clarification.
Yeah.
I'm just curious which ones stick out to your head of like, this is why I would have picked it. I just want to know.
I mean, I'd have to boot up my 3DS because a lot of this stuff is on my console. Now I don't.
Oh no, digital games. What are you
I know.
doing?
I think my 3DS is dead, so that would be a whole just laying under my bed.
Rip.
But yeah, like I mean, there's been times where I've said like the 3DS was like one of the best consoles on the market. So
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
the fact that it was not picked here is very surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Also, let's talk about some other stuff that was not picked.
Okay.
Not picked. None of these Sega consoles outside of the Dreamcast. So no
Yeah, I mean
Genesis, no Master
I
System.
considered the Genesis.
Yeah.
I really did consider the Genesis because I like that system a lot.
No Atari stuff. Which,
No.
yeah.
No.
The N64, which we were talking about while picking.
I really thought you thought I would pick that
Mhm.
one because I have been a big defender of the 64 against you.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of games that I really like on the 64.
Yeah.
But when looking at the ones that I picked, I'm like, yeah, I think there are better games on these.
Yeah. The PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
The Wii.
Yeah.
The Wii U. No.
Man, the Wii U did its best. Had Tokyo Mirage Sessions.
The only other one I would probably say the PS4.
PS4 it did some good work.
Mm-hmm.
I do like the PS4 quite a bit.
In terms of handheld, what do we got here? The Game & Watch, obviously.
Obviously.
The Etch-a-Sketch Animator 2000. The Atari Lynx. The Game Gear. Gotta get all of those in. Sega Nomad. The Game.com. And the Pocket Station and the Wonder Swan. And of course, the N-Gage. Now, I think the only one that we're like missing is like 3DS. Like, we're not gonna put PSP on here.
No.
Like, that's not gonna be a thing.
Nope.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's on that we should have put on here is 3DS. Like, that's the only thing really like upper echelon that is missing from handheld.
Mm-hmm.
But I think these
But we
are
only had 2 slots, so
exactly. So that makes it a little bit more difficult. I think these are two solid lists.
I think so.
But which is the better?
Yours?
Okay, thank you. I'll take that. Round of applause for me.
I mean, honestly, like the top 2 alone.
Yeah.
Do it. Like I did the best that I could with what I had, but once you took Super Nintendo and PS2, it was over.
Yeah, you went very Nintendo heavy afterwards. You were just like, I'm just gonna.
I didn't have much
I'm getting all
choice.
these Nintendo consoles, and I was like, I'll pick the Game Boy, I guess.
And I mean, like it makes sense because I've always leaned heavily Nintendo.
Oh, yeah.
I always have.
Yeah.
But like once you pick those 2, it's like, all right, well, like the one that I was really, really proud of myself for getting was the PS1.
Yeah, that's a really good choice.
Because the other ones are really good consoles, and I still like wholeheartedly endorse my list that I made.
Mm-hmm.
But like, again, your first 2 alone, just that wins it.
I think mine as well is just it's a very eclectic list.
Yeah.
It's very all over the place.
Yeah.
Which I think it's also just it's a very me list, which I like. So, but yours is also a very you list. So there you go. So there's your little sampler of what we were thinking of doing on the Patreon. Like we said earlier, when we do these on Patreon, we're going to do these like we'll just like random. We have a list of a bunch of consoles. We're going to randomize it, and then we'll be like, okay, well, we've landed on the PlayStation 1 this time, so we're going to go find a bunch of games from the PS1, put a list of them up for ourselves, and then we will come head to head. We'll draft, and we'll see which who has the better list of games at the end of the day. We'll be more prepared basically for those than we were for this. Let's say.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what my list would be if I had like every could have.
Mm-hmm.
I know some of this would probably be the same.
Yeah.
Like I would definitely do SNES. I would definitely do PlayStation 2. I would definitely do PlayStation 1.
Mm-hmm.
I would keep the DS on there. I don't remember how many numbers I have.
I feel like with mine, I would probably swap out Dreamcast for PS1 and Vita
I
for
would probably
3DS.
I would swap out Game Boy Advance for the Vita.
Yeah. I think everything else I would just leave.
Yeah, I think I would Game Boy Advance would be Vita. I think I would the SNES in place of the NES. And
PS2
I
in
think
place
that
of GameCube.
yeah, I think that's what I would do.
That would be
And
a
then
very
otherwise,
good list.
right. I think that's how I would do my list, honestly.
Mhm.
If I had like free reign.
Yeah. Well, I think we came up with 6 or 12 solid consoles.
Good job, consoles.
Good job.
Proud of you for existing.
They did the thing.
Except for 360, who decided to die most of the time.
That's true as well. So yeah, that's gonna wrap this episode up. If you'd like more of these kinds of episodes, subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/SACOVA, where we'll be doing more of these on a, I guess, somewhat regular basis whenever we have time to get research and do all that stuff. But that's the current plan of we're gonna try and make that a more regular series for the Patreon, so you guys have more stuff up there and everything. But yeah, give you a little preview of what's to come, essentially. A little preview.
No preview.
But yeah, that's going to wrap this episode up. If you would like more from us, head on over to seasonalanimecheckup.com or sac.cool, where you can find past episodes of this podcast and other podcasts like Jared Now Watch. You can also find columns and reviews on the site as well. If you'd like more from Anladium, go to anladium.com. She's got columns and reviews. You can follow us on Twitter and TikTok at Anime Checkup. You can buy our books, One Shining Moment, A Critical Analysis of Love, Life, Sunshine, and Hot Tubs and Pac-Man on Amazon.com. And you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/SACOVA. Buy us a slice of pizza, get access to unedited versions of the podcast early, and bonus episodes like this and other stuff on there as well. Next week, we will most likely have finished the first Great Ace Attorney game.
It was longer than we expected it
Yeah.
to
Yeah. So we'll
be. But we're making steady progress.
we'll most likely have it done by next week. So
At least the first one.
yes, so we'll probably talk about that, and then that'll be it.
We'll see what happens after
We'll
that.
see what happens after that. Yeah. So join us next week for whatever happens after that.
Yay.